You weren't kidding when you said these costumes were heavy, Gray groans as he slips another garment bag over his shoulder. There's a linen ruff around his neck and a Renaissance style on his head, giving him the look of a kid who just rummaged through someone's costume box and gotten lost in it. What did you make them out of? Lead? He asks. It's not the material that's heavy. I stifle a giggle and push him towards the door. Those dresses have about 4 different layers. I had to make them true to the time period the play is set in. Did you know that fabric choices in the Renaissance era were a huge part of showing off someone's status? I continue, getting swept up in my passion for the subject. And of course, back then they didn't have zippers, so people were literally zoomed into their outfits. Imagine always needing someone else to help you get in and out of clothes. I giggle at the thought, and Gray gives me an impressed look as he comes up beside me. Well, you certainly know your stuff, he says with a grin. And if you ever need it, I'll always ready to help you undress. He wiggles his eyebrows suggestively, and I scoff at the remark, doing my best to smother my laughter. I adjust the bags that are slung over my arms, and as I pull the front door shut behind me and ensure it's locked. Gray holds the door of the waiting taxi open for me, and we bundle into the back seat. The costume's much too heavy to carry all the way to Clanner Academy. We sort ourselves out between the garment bags, hats, and shoes, and when the car takes off down this road, I look over at him and say thoughtfully, you may not care about fashion, but these kinds of details are important, especially when it comes to an academy production. Gray raises an eyebrow at me, and I'm not well aware that I'm strung tighter than tighter than usual. I just really want everyone to like these outfits. First of all, who says I don't care about fashion? You've seen the way I dress. He gives me a crooked smile. I know he's teasing me, and I find it difficult to stop the smile that spreads across my face. It's true, though, his style does suit him. Second, who cares what a bunch of academy snobs think about a couple of dresses and tunics? With a sigh, I look out the window, watching the familiar buildings pass us by wistfully. I'm just nervous, that's all. Wringing my hands together in my lap, I do a last-minute count of all the pieces in my head and pray I haven't forgotten anything. If people like these costumes, then they'll come to me for other events, I explain. There's the Academy Ball, the graduation dinner, and future theater productions, to name a few. Something settles on my chest like a paperweight, images of the worst case scenarios washing over me. And if they don't like them, Gray surprises me by reaching out and taking my trembling hand in his, holding it tight. They're going to love them. How could they not, after all the effort you've put into them? I let out a slow exhale, smiling at him in return. Thanks, I hope you're right. The taxi turns a corner and rumbles along down the road, getting closer and closer to our destination. Of course, I understand what reputation can do for a business, Grace says absent, absent-mindedly, looking out the window ahead of us. Speaking of business, I say as I adjust my grip, but don't let go of his hands. I've noticed more people around the basement than usual lately. He gives me a look from the corner of his eyes, one that I can't quite decipher. Who would have thought so many people were into board games? I add with a shrug. His lips curve in a way that means nothing but trouble, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Oh, you'd be surprised, he says. I thought that after our little game of jumble, you might be interested in other games. I squeeze his hand in surprise, not missing the insinuative. Having spent so much time around him lately, I've learned that to expect that some kind of flirtatious remark will always follow that smile of his. Only if you're the one teaching me the rules, I flirt right back, my mouth hooking up at the side. Gray leans closer, the subtle scent of his cologne drifting over me when he brushes a few strands of hair back from my face. Trust me, I wouldn't let anyone else tell you what to do, he says softly, though his eyes burn with intent. My breath sticks in my throat as I meet him head on. I worry for a moment that the driver might overhear us, but then decide just as quickly that I don't care. Neither would I say, keeping my eye locked on his. The air between us is charged with electricity, bringing goosebumps to the surface of my skin. Surprisingly, Gray pulls back first and huffs a laugh, leaning back against the leather of his seat. Glad to hear it. When I feel the car slowing down, I peek out the window to find we are just arriving at the academy. Finally, I let out a breath. After gathering everything up from the back of the taxi, we head towards the gates of the school. Classes are finished for the day, though Nikki had messaged me to say drama club will be rehearsing in the auditorium until dark. Gray stuffs his hands into his pocket, casually looking around. Feels a lot less intense since the last time we were here. I stifle a chuckle. Well, last time we jumped out a window to get away from one of the teachers. He grins at me, his eyes lifting up at the corners. I'd do it again. How about we enter the school like normal people this time around? I offer. He politely bows and gestures towards the entrance. After you, my lady. I roll my eyes at him with a smile. We enter the auditorium, and I instantly spot Nikki in front of the stage, watching over a group of kids as they rehearse a scene. I recognize it at once, the infamous death scene. I watch transfixed as Juliet picks up the fake dagger and stabs it into her stomach. A ripple of red ribbons stream from her abdomen in theatrical portrayal of blood, and I'm glad to note that The costumes won't be ruined by any fake blood on the night. Can we put these down somewhere? Gray mumbles from beside me. My arms are about to break off. With an amused shake of my head, I lead the way down the steps in the middle of the building, past rows and rows of seats and a few spectators that have come to watch the rehearsal. I watch Nikki's form grow closer as we approach, and a thought suddenly trickles into my mind. How am I supposed to explain to him that the Phantom, of all people, is here to help me deliver the costumes? And even worse than that we're friends. I'd spent so much time worrying about the costumes that I hadn't even come up with a way to avoid the topic. Upon hearing our footsteps, Nicky turns and smiles wide, his eyes going straight to the bags in our hands. "They're here," he exclaims loud enough for the actors to pause their scene. "Thank you so much for bringing them down here, Hazel." No problem," I say with a forced smile, stepping in front of Gray to block him from view. This fails miserably since he stands over half a foot taller than me, but I don't know what else to do. At least I can be sure that Nicky won't recognize him from appearance alone. Gray shouldn't be able to recognize him either. Nicky was much shorter in his teenage years and definitely had less facial hair. "You can put them down here. You can put them down in the first row. I'll have the actors try them on while you're here to make sure they're all okay," Nicky says as he takes one of the bags from me and leads the way. After placing the costumes down over the seats and directing them to the right people, Nicky lets out a satisfied sigh and turns to Gray. I don't believe we've met. I'm Nicky," he says with a smile, shaking Gray's hand firmly. He's just a friend of mine," I reply, stepping in between them. "So how are rehearsals going?" I ask with a forced smile. Nicky frowns a little, giving Gray a second look before shaking his head and grinning. "Excellent. I'd say we're almost ready for the performance next week, after a couple of dress rehearsals, of course." "That's great," I say, and I'm truly glad to hear it. We walk with Nicky over to the front of the stage, glancing over the props and set pieces. The Academy really hasn't held back for this production. Everything looks so professional and well made. "You'll stop by on opening night, won't you?" I promised I'd save you a seat. "I'm sure you'd enjoy seeing your work in action." "I'll be there." I bob on the spot, smiling broadly. If a glimpse I got earlier is anything to go by, the play is going to be amazing. "Great. I'm looking forward to it. You can sit with me," he says with a smile. Beside me, I catch a hint of something in Gray's demeanor as he shifts around. The actors begin to emerge in their costumes, and I take out my portable sewing kit, making some small adjustments here and there. Gray takes a seat in the audience a few rows back, pulling out his phone while he waits. I felt bad for interrupting him before. It was rude of me, but I just couldn't risk Nicky finding out who he is and spilling everything. Overall, the costumes fit great, and they look amazing. I get a glimpse of the actors on the stage in them, under the different lights, and a bubble of pride swells within me. I did a really good job. Hazel, I've been meaning to ask you something, Nikki asks after a little while, coming to stand beside me. From the corner of my eye, I see Gray look up, and I know he's watching the two of us. What is it? I ask, ignoring the weight of Gray's gaze. I wondered if you'd come and meet me for a drink something. I wondered if you'd come and meet me for a drink something this week. It's been so long since we spent any time together. It might be nice to catch up. Oh, sure, that would be really nice, I say, a little caught on the spot. Fantastic. I look forward to hearing all about this boutique of yours. I hope you'll tell me everything. I'll tell you anything you want to know, I say with a smile, sparing a glance at Gray, who has returned to his phone. We should head off, I say to Nikki, noticing him follow my gaze. We'll leave you to your rehearsals. Nikki nods, and I don't miss the final look he throws at Gray after he smiles at me. Of course, thanks again for the costumes. They really are perfect. After saying our goodbyes, Gray and I head out of the auditorium, neither of us speaking as we reach the street. There's a tension between us that wasn't there before, and I hate the way it feels. The sky overhead is quickly darkening, a chill lingering in the air. I've already called the taxi, though it should take a bit before it arrives. Old boyfriend? He asks. I can tell by his tone that he is less than impressed by what happened back there, but to ask if Nikki is my boyfriend, that's really odd. No, just an old classmate. I look him in the eye and smile, trying to sound casual. Is that so? He raises an eyebrow, and I know he doesn't believe me. I don't reply, and I'm thankful that he seems to take the hint and say no more about it. As we walk down the road, he shoves his hands in his pockets, suddenly letting out a soft laugh. I remember this place, he says as he slows, looking around. You know, back in the day, I had a crush on an academy girl. Oh, I turn and look at him, surprise written all over my face. This is news to me. Yeah, you kind of remind me of her. He says with a dip on his head. He toes the ground in front of him, giving me a sly smile. I rack my brain, trying to remember if I ever saw one of the academy girls with him. I'm sure I never did. What was she like? I ask, hoping he'll give me a clue. She was stubborn, he laughs. A real pain in the ass. My eyebrows deep in the middle. He said that I reminded him of this girl, and now I don't quite know whether to take that as a compliment or not. But she was also funny and brave and beautiful, he adds. His mouth quirks at the way I frown, though I don't know what he has to be amused by. I still can't figure out who the girl is. We ended up in this very bush once, hiding from a few gang members. I was trying to do something nice by returning the phone she lost, and in return she bit my head off, he says, smiling at the memory. Oh, I suppose I do know that girl after all. She was me. When I don't say anything, Gray steps closer, his pale hair falling into his face when he stares down at me. Hazel. He says my name, and I can't stop myself from looking at him, tumbling deeper into those stormy gray eyes. You trust me, don't you? He had asked the same question the night of the funfair, and I evaded the question. I'm still not quite sure of my answer, and it doesn't help that something about this situation feels different. You seem to put a lot of weight on the word. Is it so important to you? I ask. It is. Without trust, what else do you have? But it takes time to build that trust, doesn't it? I say, rebooting him gently. As our eyes meet, silence befalls us both. Our gaze is charged with emotion, with so many things unsaid. When he leans in, a hand on my waist, I don't stop him, my heart beating beneath my chest like the wings of a tiny hummingbird. Gray, wait, I stammer. I never expected to fall for him so fast. I want this so badly it hurts, but still, our first kiss shouldn't happen like this. He drawls out. His nose brushes mine, his warm breath sending a ripples of chills across my skin. My eyes close, lashes flitting across the tops of my cheeks, and I want him to close that gap between us. I want him to kiss me, but he has to know everything first. My body draws closer to his, my breath staggers, waiting for the moment our lips will touch. All of a sudden, the taxi pulls up and my mind reels itself back. Panic hits me harder than the freight train, and I pull away from him. What am I doing? I can't do this. I shouldn't be doing this when I've been lying all this time. I'm sorry, I say before I enter the taxi and close the door. Raindrop, please, I tell the driver. Grace silently watches me as I leave without him, and a feeling of guilt and remorse eats away at me. I don't see Gray for the rest of the week after I ditched him, but I know he's been around. It's like there's something in the air whenever he's on the premises. I can feel it like electricity crackling against my skin. I still hear the group on their usual nights, and once or twice I've run into Gray's friends as they've arrived to play games. They're always polite, and after Gray banned them from drinking on the premises, they're fairly well behaved, and I have no complaints. All of them except Evan, of course, but luckily I haven't run into him again since the night he showed up drunk and missed the game of Dragon. And then there's Gray himself. I've been avoiding him, and I think he's doing the same to me. I guess after leaving him like that, without an explanation, would make anyone a little peeved. I don't know how to be honest. I find myself closing this door later each night, thinking he might stop by, but he never does. And then I always feel silly for waiting. I should just talk to him first, send him a message, say I'm sorry, or head down to the basement when he's there alone. Somehow I just can't bring myself to do it, and then I decide Maybe it's better this way. My phone buzzes and my chest clenches, silently hoping it's a message from Gray. When I check the screen, my heart drops. Sarah's name flashes across the screen. Hey, want to catch a movie tonight? I haven't heard from you all week. I can't, sorry. I'm buried under work. Boo, let me know when you're free to hang out. Of course. I lay back on the sofa and let my phone drop beside me before I lose myself in another episode of Super Yacht Singles. I feel bad about lying to my best friend, but I'm really not in a social mood and I don't want to have to explain to her what's wrong. Because when it comes down to it, nothing is wrong at all. Nothing was ever going to happen with Gray, and I couldn't let in. When my eyes drift over to the bottom shelf of the bookcase, settling on the jumbo box, I try my best not to cry. The taxi arrives at the nightclub. Nikki messaged me earlier today, reminding me that I had agreed to meet him for a drink, and I was happy to see his name pop up on my screen. Going out into the world will give me a distraction from everything else going on in my life. I haven't spoken to Gray all week, and I'm determined not to let it ruin my mood. I feel bad about blowing Sarah off last night and then meeting up with Nikki, but it's easier this way. I know that Nikki won't pry, and I can't move around on my couch watching reality TV forever. The bar we're meeting at is on Academy territory and used to be a frequent haunt of the gang once they were old enough to drink. I've avoided it for a long time, afraid that I might run into too many familiar faces. But right now, I'm not seeing a whole lot of familiar people at all. In fact, given the look of some people hanging around here, I think they might be Riversiders. Tentatively, I enter the building, looking around for Nikki's familiar face. I spot him sitting on a stool at the bar, and he smiles when he sees me. There you are. He greets me with a hug and a kiss on the cheek, gesturing for me to sit beside him. What can I get you? Just a glass of wine, thanks, I say as I shrug out of my coat, hanging it out over the back of the bar stool. Glancing around, I see even more unfamiliar faces inside the bar, and more than a few of them are looking my way, sizing me up. I pull my hand back close. The bartender sets a glass in front of me, and I take a long sip of my drink. This week has been strange and much too long. Meeting up with a friend couldn't have come at a better time. Nikki smiles, waiting for me to set my glass down again before he speaks. So, how are things with you? How's the business? He asks, and I can tell by his tone that he's genuinely interested. It's going great. For the most part, I say. I'm still building up a client base, but I'm sure I'll get there eventually. If your craftsmanship with the costumes is any indicator, I don't doubt it. Nicky raises his glasses to me. Nicky raises his glass to me before taking a sip. It surprises me by how he's changed since before. He's much more eloquent with his words. He's really grown up. I smile, thinking of the costumes I made for the play and feeling a little twinge of guilt. Although I enjoyed making them, I'd had my own personal motivation for taking on the job. I have to be honest with you. My intentions when making the costumes weren't entirely noble, I admit, and Nicky cocks his head in interest. Oh. I swallow around the lump in my throat, giving a nervous laugh. I was hoping that if people liked my work, they might commission me to tailor their outfits for other academy events. Nikki laughs out loud, and though the sound catches me off guard, it chases away a little of the guilt. Geez, Hazel, you had me scared. I thought it was something serious, he grins. Well, hey, the school blog will be doing a write-up on the performance. I'll make sure they include your details in there. Let them know who's responsible for the costumes. Really? I almost choke on my drink in surprise. That would be amazing. He gives me an amused look, his eyes crinkling behind his glasses. We're still friends, aren't we? It's only natural to help each other out. I nod, though my smile falters a little. I've already helped him out with the costumes for the play. That must be what he's thinking of. And what about you, Professor? How's the teaching gig going? I ask him. He leans against the counter, getting comfortable. Honestly, it's great. The kids are the best part, even though they're always getting themselves into trouble. His eyes light up when he speaks. Oh, what kind of trouble? I encourage him to continue. Well, about a week ago, a couple of boys from my class managed to swipe the keys to the principal's car and fill the air conditioning unit with confetti. She was furious. He chuckles at the memory and shakes his head fondly. Man, it was near impossible to keep a straight face when she told me about it. I almost wish I had come up with the idea first. It sounds just like the kind of things we got up to at school, I say with a laugh. Do you remember the time we broke into the groundskeeper's shed and covered everything in bubble wrap? Like it was yesterday. He was a good guy. Thought it was hilarious. Nicky chuckles. What about the time we let ourselves get locked in the library and camped out overnight? Yes, apart from Sarah attempting to scale an entire wall of books and almost knocking it over. That was the best night. She was crazy back then. Nicky pushes his glasses up and wipes at his eyes as he chuckles. Oh, she still is, I assure him with a giggle. We laugh together, ordering a couple more drinks and reminiscing on all of our old memories, and there are a lot of them. It's good to hear that kids these days haven't changed much, I say after a while. They really haven't, Nicky says. And besides all of the mischief, The rivalry with both Riverside High and the couple is still going strong. I don't think that will ever change, I admit, my smile slowly fading. Nicky looks away suddenly, clearing his throat a little before he speaks. You know, as much as I love catching up with you, there's also another reason I asked you to meet me, he admits, and as he leans in closer. What is it? I ask, feeling a little lightheaded from the wine. I don't know how much you know about the old gang, but there's a few of us who still hang out, keeping an eye on our territory, he starts, and my stomach sinks. I should have known it was something to do with the gang. As if sensing I'm already beginning to close off, Nicky leans forward, his eyes finding mine. Things started getting bad a few years back, he explains. The Hammer and the Riversiders took over almost our entire territory. That's why I've seen so many unfamiliar faces around here tonight, I say. Nicky nods in confirmation. Most of the gangs were too afraid to stand up against them after you and Sarah left. Over the years, it's been getting worse and worse. I don't know what this has to do with me, I say bluntly. Nicky runs a hand through his hair before speaking, seeming to look for the right words. The gang is still loyal to you, Hazel. I wanted to ask if you'll come back and fight with us again. We could take back our turf together. I left that life behind me 10 years ago. I have a business to think about now, I say sharply, staring him down to drive the point home. Nicky hesitates, and it seems like I still have some of my old spirits, though I can't help but be annoyed that this is the reason he called me here. Was this your plan all along? Fill me with drinks, and then press your ideas of reforming the gang onto me? It's not like that. He holds up a hand in innocence. Not exactly. Then why don't you explain it to me? I say impatiently, tapping my fingertips against the bar. He gives me a look, and if I didn't know any better, I'd say he might be impressed. I guess that old gang leader is still here, somewhere inside of me, deep, deep down. It won't be long before the Riversiders' presence causes troubles for your business. I guarantee it. He fidgets with his empty glass, rolling the bottom across the bar. They're out to own everything there is in the city. They won't stop. And the couple gang? I ask, not sure I want to hear the answer. They've been laying low, but rumors has it that the Hammer has them in the palm of their hands whenever the Riversiders come for the last of us, and they will. You can be sure that the couples will be on their side. But why? Why would they work together? I ask. I mentioned the Hammer and the Phantom have been up to something, right? Nicky says. I think they're planning on getting rid of the last of the Academy Royalists, ridding us from the board completely. I want to believe that Gray wouldn't do something like that, but I know what he was like back in his prime. I saw it with my own eyes. But how would he benefit from something like that? He spends his time running a board game group out of my basement. Then again, why is Evan so involved in this same group? Maybe the gaming is just a way for him to blow off steam, but I can never be sure when it comes to him. They're dangerous, Hazel. More so than they ever were, he says, and I swear I see the hand around his glass tremble. I'm afraid of what could happen to all of us. Nicky has always been serious about stuff like this, but I've never seen him so scared before. Still, none of this makes any sense to me. I can't, Nicky. I'm sorry. I left the gang for a reason. I understand. He dips his head, defeat finally washing over him. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. Thankfully, he drops the topic for the rest of the evening.